I'm Ryan O'Dad, and you're listening to Ryan's Audiobooks on the Issues Magazine YouTube channel. Today we continue with Section 6.5, Prometheus Rising, Robert Anton Wilson. Chapter 3, The Oral Biosurvival Circuit. Genes, like Leibniz's monads, have no windows. The higher properties of life are emergent. Edward Wilson, Sociobiology. Few of our ancestors were perfect ladies or gentlemen. The majority of them were not even mammals. Any multicellular organism must, if it is to survive, contain a hardwired biosurvival circuit, which very simply programs an either-or choice. Go forward to the nourishing, the protective, or go back, away from the threatening, the predatory. Any mammal hooks the biosurvival circuit to the first imprinted biosurvival object, the teat. Biosurvival and orality are deeply blended in all mammals, including domesticated primates. This is why, despite the cancer terror, an estimated 30 million Americans still smoke cigarettes. Others chew gum, spearmint, juicy fruit, even sugar-free, something for every taste, bite their fingernails, gnaw their knuckles, scrunch pencil stubs, eat more than they need. Potato chips, anyone? A Mars bar, maybe? Pretzels, peanuts, cashews? Do you want the cheese and crackers with your beer, Mac? And do try the canapes, Mrs. Miller. Some chew their lips, gobble tranks and uppers, even munch their mustache. What goes on in the bedroom is known to the Kinsey Institute and anyone who has seen a porn film. How important is this oral imprinting? We read of a baby giraffe whose mother was accidentally killed by a jeep immediately after birth. The neonate, following hardwired genetic programs, imprinted the first object that roughly fit the giraffe archetype, the jeep itself. He followed the machine around, vocalized to it, attempted to suckle from it, and when adult tried to mate with it. Similarly, Conrad Lorenz tells of a gosling who accidentally imprinted a ping-pong ball and spent his adult life, indifferent to female geese, attempting to sexually mount ping-pong balls. As Charles Darwin noted, in our maturer years, when an object of vision is presented to us which bears any similitude to the form of the female bosom, we feel a general glow of delight which seems to influence all of our senses. The ancients pictured the great mother goddess Diana of Ephesus with literally dozens of breasts, and St. Paul reports hearing her worshippers chanting rapturously, "Great is Diana." This is virtually no great artist who has not left us a portrait, or many portraits, of the nude female form, especially the breasts. And even non-human scenes, curves are introduced wherever possible. Architects break the Euclidean straight line to introduce such carves as the highest pretext: arches, Moorish domes, etc. The curves of the suspension bridge are necessitated by Newton's laws, gravity's rainbow in Pynchon's phrase. But still, these double catenary curves are aesthetically pleasing for the reasons Darwin suggests. As for music, where did we first hear it? Who sang or hummed to us? And against what part of her body were we held? Mountain climbers are reduced, like Mallory, to saying because it's there, when trying to explain their compulsion to ascend those cosmic peaks. Our eating utensils, oral gratification tools, tend to be rounded or curved. Square plates or saucers look campy or strange. UFOs come in a variety of shapes, but the most popular are the oval and conic. Freudian suggests that opiate addiction is an attempt to return to the womb. In keeping with our theory, it's more likely that opium and its derivatives return us to the safe space on the biosurvival circuit, the warm, snug place of biosecurity. Opiates may trigger neurotransmitters characteristic of breastfeeding. Neurotransmitters are chemicals which alter the electrocolloidal balance of the brain and hence change the perceptual field. Brain change agents. In summary, the biosurvival circuit is DNA programmed to seek a comfort safety zone around a mothering organism. If a mother isn't present, the closest substitute in the environment will be imprinted. For the Oregon giraffe, a four-wheel Jeep was chosen to stand in for the four-legged mother. The gosling who could not find the round, white body of the mother goose fixated a round, white ping-pong ball. The wiring of this circuit in primitive form occurred in the first organisms, between 3 and 4 billion years ago. In the modern human, this structure remains in the brainstem and in the autonomic nervous system, where it's interconnected with the endocrine and other life support systems. This is why disturbances on this circuit act all over the body at once, and generally take the form of physical symptoms rather than mental symptoms, and usually get referred to the MD instead of the psychiatrist. It must be stressed that we are still in a primitive stage of evolution and conditions on this planet are quite brutal. Radical pediatricians insist with good evidence that childbirth by conventional means in a conventional hospital is almost always traumatic for the newborn, creates a bad imprint in our language. Our child rearing methods are far from ideal also, adding bad conditioning on top of bad imprinting. In the general violence of our societies to date, including wars, revolutions, civil wars, and the undeclared civil war of the predatory criminal class in every civilized nation, keeps the First Circuit of most people in an emergency state far too much at the time. In 1968, a U.S. public health survey showed that 85% of the population had one or more symptoms that we would call the bad First Circuit imprinting or conditioning. These symptoms included dizzy spells, heart palpitations, wet palms, and frequent nightmares. This means that 85 out of the next 100 people you meet should be regarded as more or less the walking wounded. This is the first level of meaning in our brutal, cynical proposition that most people are almost as mechanical as sci-fi robots. A man or a woman entering a new situation with the anxiety chemicals of a frightened infant coursing through the brainstem is not going to be able to observe, judge, or decide anything very accurately. We especially refer to adrenaline and adrenalutin, which signal the whole organism is prepared to fight or flee. And this is why Gurdjieff said in his own jargon that people are asleep and having nightmares. Fairness, decency? How can you expect fairness or decency on a planet of sleeping people? G.I. Gurdjieff. This was the viewpoint of the earliest Christians, later condemned as heretics, Gnostics, by the royal Roman bureaucrats. The Gospel of Truth for a century says bluntly that history is a nightmare. As if mankind were sunk in sleep and found themselves in disturbing dreams. Either there is a place to which they are fleeing, or they are involved in striking blows, or they are receiving blows themselves. Sometimes it is as if people were murdering them, or they themselves are killing their neighbors. To these first Christians, as to the Buddhists, awakening literally meant coming out of the nightmare of terrifying fantasies. In our terminology, it means correcting the editing that causes us to behave and perceive like very badly wired robots, and suddenly seeing the unedited world. It must be emphasized that this circuit, being the oldest in evolutionary development, is the most mechanical and the most rapid. One is not conscious of time at all on the biosurvival circuit. Observe the speed of your dog's reaction at the first sound of an intruder. The threatening bark and the movement of the whole body to alert status is automatic. Then the dog starts taking in other cues to determine how this particular intruder should be treated. As Robert Ardrey reports the remarks of primatologist Ray Carpenter, to understand this part of your brain. Imagine that you are a monkey and you're running along a path past a rock and unexpectedly meet face-to-face another animal. Now, before you know whether to attack it, to flee it, or to ignore it, you must make a series of decisions. Is it monkey or non-monkey? If non-monkey, is it pro-monkey or anti-monkey? If monkey, is it male or female? If female, is she interested? If male, is it adult or juvenile? If adult, is it of my group or some other? You have about 1/5 of a second to make all these decisions or you could be attacked. The biosurvival program first attaches to the safe spaces around the mother, and then with age moves around further and further out, exploring what is safe and what is not. Without hardwired genetic programs, i.e. automatic programs, this second stage would be impossible, and no mammal would ever leave the teat. The hardwired programs act automatically, unconsciously, because if you had to stop and think out each situation, you would be eaten by the first predator. Of course, the imprint is made by chance, by the circumstances at the moment of imprint vulnerability. Recall the godsling who imprinted the ping-pong ball. Some imprint bravery, inquisitiveness, and exploratory drive. Others imprint timidity, infophobia, fear of the unpredictable, and withdrawal, of which the extreme case is the sad imprint called autism or childhood schizophrenia. First circuit, biosurvival consciousness is one-dimensional. Timid retreat, confident advance. All of which is robotic until one learns how to reprogram and re-imprint one's own brain circuits. In most cases, such metaprogramming skill is never required. It all goes by on a flash on mechanical autopilot in 0 time. I just found myself doing it, says a soldier, as he is being court-martialed for cowardice, or decorated for bravery. Of course, on top of the hardwired conditioning of the biosurvival circuit comes softer conditioning. This allows the safe space perimeter to be generalized outward from the mother's body to the pack or the tribe, the so-called extended family. Every social animal has, in addition to the Darwinian instinct, genetic program, of self-preservation, a similar instinct to protect the gene pool. This is the basis of altruism, and social animals would not survive without it. Wild dogs bark to warn the rest of the pack that an intruder is coming. Your domesticated dog identifies you as a pack leader. He barks to warn you that an intruder is coming. He also barks, of course, to warn the intruder that he's ready to fight for his territory. As civilization has advanced, the pack bond, the tribe, the extended family has been broken. This is the root of the widely diagnosed ennui or alienation or existential anguish about which so many social critics have written so eloquently. What has happened is that the conditioning of the biosurvival bond to the gene pool has been replaced by conditioning of biosurvival drives to hook onto the peculiar tickets which we call money. Concretely, a modern man or woman doesn't look for biosurvival security in the gene pool, the pack, the extended family. Biosurvival depends on getting the tickets. You can't live without money, as the living theater troupe used to cry out in anguish. If the tickets are withdrawn, acute biosurvival anxiety appears at once. Imagine as vividly as possible what you would feel and what you would need to do if all your sources to biosurvival tickets were cut off tomorrow. This is precisely what tribal men and women feel it cut off from the tribe. It's why exile or even ostracism were sufficient punishments to enforce tribal conformity throughout most of human history. As recently as Shakespeare's day, the threat of exile was an acute terror signal. Banished, crimes Romeo. The damned use that word in hell. In traditional society, belonging to the tribe was biosecurity. Exile was terror and real threat of death. In modern society, having the tickets is biosecurity. Having the tickets withdrawn is terror. Welfare, socialism, totalitarianism, etc. present attempts in varying degrees of rationality or hysteria to recreate the tribal bond by making the state stand in for the gene pool. Conservatives who claim that no form of welfare is tolerable to them are asking that people live with total biosurvival anxiety, and ennui combined with terror. The conservatives, of course, vaguely recognize this and ask for quote-unquote local charity to replace state welfare, i.e. they ask for the gene pool to be restored by magic among people who are not genetically related at all. On the other hand, the state is not a gene pool or a tribe and cannot really play the biosurvival unit convincingly. Everybody on welfare becomes paranoid because they are continually worrying that they are going to get cut off, exiled, for some minor infraction of the increasingly incomprehensible bureaucratic rules. And in real totalitarianism, in which the bogus identification of the state with the tribe is carried to the point of a new mysticism, the paranoia becomes total. Real bonding can only occur in face-to-face groups of reasonable size. Hence the perpetual attempt, however implausible in industrial circumstances, to decentralize, to go back to the tribal ethos, to replace the state with syndicates, as in anarchism, or affinity groups, Reich's Consciousness Third. Recall the hippie crash pad of the 60s, which lives on in many rural communes. Back in the real world, the tickets called money are the biosurvival bond for most people. Anti-Semitism is a complex aberration of many facets and causes, but in its classic form, the quote-unquote Jewish bankers conspiracy, it simply holds that a hostile gene pool controls the tickets for biosecurity. Such paranoia is inevitable in a money economy. Junkies have similar myths about who controls the supply of heroin. Thus, as anti-Semitism has declined in America, the so-called bankers conspiracy lives on in a new form. Now the villains are New England WASP families, the Yankee establishment. Some leftists will even show you charts of the genealogies of these WASP bankers, the way anti-Semites used to show Rothschild genealogies. The alpha males eat first, the runts of the litter get whatever's left over. Thus concludes section 6.5, Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson. We are still in Chapter 3, the Oral Biosurvival Circuit, which is where we'll pick up tomorrow. I'll see you then. Alam.